Royal tensions just exploded, and this time, it's personal. Princess Anne, known for her restraint and loyalty, is reportedly furious after Queen Consort Camilla made a cutting comment about the late Princess Diana. The remark, subtle but sharp, was caught on camera and quickly spread across headlines. But no one expected Anne to react until she did. With words that shook the monarchy and silence that spoke volumes, Anne stepped into battle, defending Diana's legacy like never before. What did Camilla say? Why did it hit so hard? And has the palace just stepped into its most dangerous rift yet? The bombshell dropped. The moment was supposed to be light. A small royal event, casual remarks, polite applause. But then, Camilla spoke, and what she said sent shockwaves through the monarchy. She was answering a question about public memory and modernizing the monarchy when her tone shifted. "We can't keep idolizing the past," she said. "Some figures were more complicated than the public ever knew." It was subtle, but everyone heard it. And everyone knew who she meant. Within hours, the media pounced. Tabloids turned it into a headline storm. Camilla shades Diana, Queen Consort questions People's Princess. Even the more cautious outlets couldn't resist. Clips of her comment aired on every screen. Hosts dissected her phrasing, her smirk, her intention. To some, it sounded like Camilla was finally dropping the royal filter. But to others, it was something worse. A swipe at a woman who can't defend herself. Princess Diana. The backlash was immediate. Social media exploded with anger. Supporters of Diana called it tasteless, unnecessary, and deeply disrespectful. But it wasn't just the public that took notice. Inside the palace, it struck a nerve with someone who doesn't often get involved in royal drama. But when she does, the firm listens, Princess Anne. Her connection to Diana had been complicated at times, but the respect was real. And Camilla's words? They crossed a line, one that Anne wasn't going to ignore. The stage was set. The quote was everywhere. And behind closed doors, the royals braced for the fallout. Because this wasn't going to stay quiet. Who is Princess Anne? Princess Anne has never chased the spotlight. She doesn't do drama. She doesn't do pity. But when she speaks, it matters. She's the royal who shows up, stays late, and rarely complains. The one who's done thousands of engagements without ever making a fuss. That's why this moment carries weight. Anne is seen by many as the true backbone of the monarchy. She's blunt, honest, and fiercely protective of the family, when they deserve it. And when they don't, she says so, out loud. Her history with Diana wasn't perfect. They were different women, shaped by different roles. But over time, a quiet alliance grew. They shared the same struggles, being women in a system designed for men. They shared respect, and by the end of Diana's life, they shared trust. Anne has defended Diana before, not always with headlines, but with actions. When other royals distanced themselves after the divorce, Anne kept showing up. She never spoke ill of Diana in public, and that silence was powerful. Now, that silence is gone. Because Camilla's comment didn't just attack Diana's image, it insulted Anne's sense of honor. And in Anne's world, loyalty is sacred. So when word reached Anne, it wasn't just offense, it was personal. Camilla's comment unpacked. Camilla's words weren't screamed. They weren't even shouted. But that's what made them more dangerous. They were smooth, calculated, and quiet enough to pass as casual. It's important not to live in a fantasy. Some legacies aren't as golden as people like to pretend. That was the full quote. At first glance, it sounds harmless, but context matters, and so does tone. She said it during a panel with journalists. The crowd was small, but the cameras were on, and Camilla knew that. Experts immediately caught the implication. This wasn't offhand, one royal commentator said. This was rehearsed. And it wasn't the first time. Camilla has a history of small jabs, subtle language, light comments that always seem to leave a bruise. But this one hit differently. Because Diana's legacy is sacred to many, she's remembered as the princess who broke tradition, showed emotion, and connected with people in a way few royals ever have. And Camilla, who once played the role of the other woman, knows how fragile that memory is. To speak about Diana that way, in public, felt like rewriting history with a smirk. Palace sources were split. Some said Camilla was simply speaking her truth. Others admitted it was a risky choice, one that wasn't cleared by advisors. And there were whispers. Maybe it wasn't a slip. Maybe it was a signal. A sign that Camilla, now Queen Consort, was reshaping her public identity, even if it meant tearing at someone else's. But if that was the plan, she didn't expect Anne, because someone was about to push back, and hard. Anne finds out. The news didn't reach Anne through headlines. She was briefed, directly, quietly, by someone close enough to know she'd want to hear it before it became a media circus. She was in her study at Gatcombe Park when the aide approached. They showed her the video, played the clip, repeated the phrasing, and then waited. Anne didn't say much at first. She sat still, eyes narrowed, face unreadable. But those who know her said they recognized the signs immediately. The way her hands tightened, the way her foot started tapping. It wasn't surprise. It was fury, slow, silent, and about to boil over. Later that day, palace whispers confirmed it. Anne is livid. This wasn't just outrage, it was grief. Anne had never forgotten what Diana endured. She saw the cold shoulders, the double standards, the pain behind the public smile. And now, decades later, Diana was being disrespected by someone who had once been the reason for her heartbreak. For Anne, this wasn't royal rivalry. This was about legacy, justice, and loyalty to a woman who had suffered in silence. And Princess Anne? She doesn't believe in silence. She believes in action. The royal feud boils over. Anne didn't wait. She acted. Within 24 hours, something subtle but unmistakable happened. A statement. Not an official broadcast, not a televised attack, but a comment from sources close to the Princess Royal made its way to the press. Princess Anne is disappointed and disturbed by recent remarks concerning the late Princess Diana. She believes the legacy of a family member should be treated with dignity and care. The message was clear. It wasn't screaming, but it was slicing. It was the royal way of saying, "Watch yourself." The tone wasn't dramatic. It was composed, controlled. But underneath, it was heat. Anne wasn't just defending Diana. She was warning Camilla. Palace aides scrambled. Meetings were called, statements were reviewed. Camilla's team reportedly went into crisis mode, unsure whether to clarify, walk it back, or say nothing. But the damage was done. Anne had drawn a line, and she wasn't backing down. This wasn't gossip. This was the beginning of something bigger, and the monarchy felt it. Because when Princess Anne speaks, the world listens. Palace pressure grows. Once Anne's statement made the rounds, the palace moved into full crisis mode. Senior aides gathered at Clarence's house. Phones buzzed. Emergency meetings stretched into the evening. This wasn't just a family disagreement anymore. It was a public feud between the Queen Consort and the Princess Royal, and it had to be handled delicately. Camilla's team felt the heat first. They were caught off guard by how fast the public turned. What was meant to be a polished event now sat at the center of a royal storm. Advisors debated. Should she apologize, reframe, or dig in? But one thing was certain. They couldn't ignore Anne. The internal atmosphere shifted. Siblings and staff started choosing sides. Quiet conversations sparked in corridors. Some believed Anne had overreacted. Others said she was right to protect Diana's legacy. The firm was cracking, maybe not publicly, but internally. The fractures were real. Lawyers reviewed past comments. PR experts drafted possible statements. One insider said, "We're in uncharted waters. When Anne pushes back, the whole system has to adjust." And that's exactly what was happening, because Anne wasn't backing down. And Camilla? She wasn't used to being challenged like this, especially not by another royal with as much public credibility. The tension was rising, and the world was watching. Public and media storm. The press didn't wait for palace spin. They went in for the kill. "Anne slams Camilla," one headline screamed. "Royal rift explodes," said another. By morning, every media outlet had turned the situation into a full-blown spectacle. And social media? It was pure chaos. Fans split into camps. #Team Anne and #Team Camilla trended for days. Memes, opinion threads, emotional tributes to Diana. All flooded timelines. Video clips from the past resurfaced, showing moments between Anne and Diana, old interviews, and lingering glances from Camilla that now looked a little too smug. Pundits took over TV panels. Morning shows ran side-by-side footage of Anne's statement and Camilla's original comment, analyzing every eyebrow raise and breath. One royal expert called it the most significant public split between senior royals since Harry and Meghan. The public wasn't just interested, they were invested. People who hadn't cared about royalty in years suddenly had an opinion. It wasn't just about a feud, it was about memory, loyalty, and whether Diana's story was truly being honored. The narrative was no longer controlled by the palace. The people had taken it over, and with every passing hour it grew louder. Camilla fights back. Camilla had remained silent until now. Under pressure and with headlines spiraling out of control, she finally issued a public response. But it wasn't an apology. It was what some called a carefully measured clarification. She didn't mention Diana by name. Instead, she said, "My words were never meant to offend or diminish the memory of any beloved member of the royal family. I regret that they've been taken in a way I did not intend." The tone was soft, almost sorrowful, but the intent was sharp. It wasn't a full retreat. It was a strategic repositioning, a move to calm the fire without admitting guilt. Her allies rushed in. Longtime friends and royal commentators appeared on television saying the remark was taken out of context. She was talking about change, not Diana specifically, they claimed. But the damage had already been done. Analysts picked apart her wording. Was it a veiled swipe, a soft apology, a clever deflection? The answers depended on whose side you were on, but the public wasn't easily swayed. To many, it sounded like Camilla was trying to smooth things over without taking real responsibility. Anne's supporters saw it as proof that Camilla still didn't understand why the remark was hurtful. And behind palace doors, Anne reportedly wasn't impressed. This wasn't over. Anne's public stand. Anne had already spoken once, but now the mood had changed. Camilla's carefully worded clarification had stirred more confusion than clarity. The public wasn't satisfied. Royal watchers weren't convinced. And behind palace walls, tensions were far from easing. So Anne spoke again. This time, she didn't use press statements or unnamed sources. She let her presence speak for itself. Days later, she appeared at a long-planned charity event, one that had nothing to do with the drama, at least on the surface. But everyone knew it wouldn't stay quiet for long. And they were right. As Anne walked toward a waiting crowd, a reporter's voice broke the air. "Do you still stand by your words about Princess Diana?" There was a brief pause, the kind that crackles with energy. Anne turned. Calm, steady, no flinch, no hesitation. She looked directly at the cameras, nodded once, and spoke with the kind of clarity that doesn't need to shout. Diana deserves to be remembered for her compassion, her courage, and the impact she left behind. That's never up for debate. Just one sentence, but it echoed like a thunderclap. She didn't name Camilla. She didn't have to. The message was loud enough. Diana's memory is not yours under critique, not in public, not ever. The silence that followed was deafening. Reporters lowered their mics. The crowd took a breath, and the cameras caught every second of it. Within minutes, the clip went viral. Social media lit up with praise. Classy, unshaken, fierce. That was the verdict from fans and critics alike. People didn't see a feud. They saw a statement about values, about respect, about the power of legacy. Anne's favorability numbers surged overnight. Even the press, known for being skeptical of her quiet consistency, admitted this moment changed her public image. She wasn't just the hard-working one anymore. She was now seen as a voice of reason, a woman who chose dignity over drama, but still drew the line when it mattered. That simple, strong quote was printed across front pages. It played on news loops worldwide. And perhaps most striking of all, it united people. Even those who didn't follow royal drama closely said it moved them. Some called it brave. Others called it overdue. But everyone called it clear. In that moment, Anne became something unexpected. The public defender of Diana's legacy. Not through a carefully planned campaign, not through palace scripts, but through honesty and the quiet authority that comes when someone finally says what so many have been thinking. She wasn't lashing out. She was standing up. And in doing so, Anne shifted the tone of the entire royal family. This wasn't just a personal defense. It was a public reckoning. And she delivered it. Firmly, gracefully, and without blinking. Broader royal reactions. Inside the palace, everything felt different. King Charles remained silent, but his silence was growing louder by the day. People close to him said he was torn. As a father, he understood Anne's position. As a husband, he was protective of Camilla. But as a king, he couldn't afford a public divide. William, always cautious, kept his distance. But body language experts noticed a shift. At a recent event, he greeted Anne with warmth, and Camilla with reserved formality, subtle but meaningful. He may not have spoken, but his presence gave clues. Other royals kept to the sidelines, watching, choosing. Some leaned toward Anne, respecting her honesty and history with Diana. Others, closer to Charles and Camilla, stayed quiet, but visibly uneasy. The internal dynamics were shifting. There was tension at dinners, awkwardness in corridors. Long-standing alliances were being tested. The firm, once united by silence, now felt split by emotion. Advisors whispered that this could lead to long-term changes in how the monarchy presents itself. Less scripted, more human, or more divided. No one knew yet. But what was clear was this: the ripple effect had begun, and the royal family would never be the same again. Implications for Diana's legacy. Camilla's comment didn't just offend Anne, it struck something deeper. Diana's legacy, a memory millions still hold close, and suddenly, that memory felt under threat. For years, Diana has been more than just a former princess. She's been a symbol of vulnerability, kindness, rebellion against cold tradition. Her image appears on murals, documentaries, candlelight tributes. Her story still echoes in interviews, headlines, and tears. That's why Camilla's words felt like more than a gaffe. They felt like a revision attempt, a subtle erasing of a woman who had already been silenced once. Anne's reaction reminded the world, Diana still matters. She's not just history. She's a human story that shaped the monarchy forever. And Anne, with her calm but cutting response, made that crystal clear. Experts began discussing it openly. Royal commentators, historians, and cultural critics all agreed. This was a turning point. Diana's legacy wasn't just being honored. It was being actively defended from within the royal family. Anne stepped into a new role, unofficial guardian of Diana's memory. Not through grand speeches or tabloid wars, but through a few powerful sentences that held more weight than 1,000 headlines. And the public responded. Flowers appeared at Kensington Palace. Old clips of Diana flooded the internet. New documentaries were rushed into production. Even younger generations who didn't live through her story were suddenly invested. All because one woman reminded the world that you don't disrespect the dead, and you never rewrite the truth just because it's inconvenient. For Camilla, this may have been one sentence. For the rest of us, it was a warning never to forget who Diana truly was. Wider conversations spark. As the storm grew, it became more than just a royal rift. It became a national conversation, then a global one. People weren't just debating what Camilla said or how Anne reacted. They were talking about something bigger: how we treat legacy, how we speak of the dead, and whether public figures should be held to higher standards. Was Camilla careless or calculated? Was Anne's response fierce or overdue? The questions spread fast, and everyone had a take. Podcasts, radio shows, op-eds, and late-night monologues dove deep. Themes of respect, grief, and the power of remembrance suddenly took center stage. And it wasn't just royal fans who cared. Sociologists, mental health experts, and even religious leaders started weighing in. Some called it a moment of public reckoning. Others warned it was just more palace drama, cleverly spun to distract from deeper issues. But either way, people were talking, and they weren't letting it go. The debate even reached schools and universities. Students studied Diana's impact on modern charity work, compared her media treatment to Meghan's, and questioned how gender, race, and emotion play out in royal narratives. And through it all, one phrase kept coming back: legacy matters. It was no longer about Camilla versus Anne. It was about how we choose to remember, and whether memory should ever be rewritten, especially when it belongs to someone who has already failed once by the institution. Because if the monarchy can't protect its most beloved icon in death, what does it say about the living? The cliffhanger. The dust hadn't settled. In fact, it was far from over. Whispers began to swirl. Was Camilla preparing a second statement? Would she clarify again, or this time offer a rare apology? Sources close to her said she was considering all options. But the pressure was rising fast. Meanwhile, Anne wasn't retreating. Insiders claimed she was holding firm and had the quiet backing of other senior royals who felt the Queen Consort had gone too far. One source even said Anne was prepared to escalate, possibly demanding an official correction behind palace walls. All eyes turned to King Charles. Would he step in, mediate, or let the silence speak for him? His hesitation only fueled speculation. Could this fracture be mended, or was the damage permanent? And then came the biggest question. What would the public do? Polls showed overwhelming support for Anne. But royal fatigue was setting in for some. Others feared this could open the door to even more old wounds, ones the palace has tried to bury for decades. Still, the real wild card remained Meghan. Would she comment? Would Harry? If they stepped in, this family feud could explode into something global. Again. For now, everyone waited, because this was no longer just about one comment. It had become a battle for truth, memory, and dignity. The kind that doesn't fade with a statement. The kind that changes history. And as the palace lights dimmed and reporters kept watch, one thing was clear. This is more than words. It's a battle for Diana's memory and the soul of the monarchy. This wasn't just a royal disagreement. It was a reckoning. Anne's fury lit the fuse. Camilla's words lit the fire. And Diana's legacy is now at the center of a storm the palace can't ignore. As silence breaks and alliances shift, one thing is certain. This royal clash has only just begun.